And I really appreciate you taking time today to
Oh,
chat with
absolutely,
me.
my pleasure. Yeah.
Just kind of, I know you wanted to keep this loose, and we absolutely will. But just to give you some format, we'll kind of talk about like your, your biography, some of your
Yeah.
earlier life, because I just kind of want to get the timeline
Yeah.
of your life,
Yeah.
and then maybe talk about the piece that symphonic band is doing, Home Away from Home.
Yeah, that sounds great.
Which is it's a lovely piece, and I've been really enjoying hearing it develop. And now that I've read more up on like what the piece is about, I really am enjoying it even more because I kind of imagine. But we'll talk a
Yeah.
little bit more about
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, sounds great.
So you were originally born in Kiev, correct?
Yeah.
Kiev, Ukraine. So
Yeah.
what was it like growing up there in the the late '80s, mid '90s?
Yeah, it was really nice actually. We were there was a lot of freedom for kids, unlike, well, I don't know what it's like in the US now, but in Australia, kids are not allowed to be without an adult supervision until they turn 12 because we had quite a few abductions. And well, in Australia it doesn't take a lot of something. Like we had one mass shooting in 1995, and that was the end. They took everyone, they bought out everyone's guns, and we have not had mass shootings ever since. So it's the same with abductions. Several kids were abducted, and after that they just decided, you know what, let's just do this. So when I was a kid, my parents separated when I was 5, and my mom got sick, and I was very independent since I was 6. I would be out by myself. I would do grocery shopping. I started cooking when I was 8.
Wow.
And in Kiev, it was much easier to do than in a lot of other places. You didn't need the car to do that, that sort of thing. And it was a lot of fun. Yeah. The first 10 years, everything was in Russian. 10 years of my life, everything was in Russian, and it was all a tiny bit grim, but not, you don't know it as a kid, right? It's fine. That's your life.
Yeah, you don't know any different.
Yeah. So we had a great childhood. But then when I turned 10, the Soviet Union collapsed. And I remember, like, now when the war started, I started analyzing it. And it was very interesting because my great grandma, with whom we lived, she would watch the plenary seating, like the parliamentary seating, which was from 1 to 4 p.m. every weekday on all 3 channels that the TV had. And she would watch it every day. It was so boring to me as a kid. And then there was the last parliamentary sitting when they announced that the Soviet Union was collapsing. Today, the Soviet Union has collapsed. And she watched it and she said, okay, I see. And she never watched the news or anything like that ever again in her life.
Wow.
So it's like she was waiting for that moment because she was very Ukrainian, very pro-Ukrainian. She never switched to Russian. She spoke Ukrainian the whole time. And it was very interesting. I didn't realize it when I was 10, I realize it now. When the war started, I started analyzing. And I realized that she was just waiting her whole life for this damn thing to collapse and for Ukraine to just be its own thing. And so when the Soviet Union collapsed, the first couple of years were hard. But they switched to Ukrainian, everything. All the school subjects became in Ukrainian, and it was just a big cultural revolution, sort of.
So within the
Straight
year.
away. Oh yeah, within like the next school term, everything was in Ukrainian already.
So you're like 11 years old.
Yeah.
And your whole curriculum for education just completely changes.
And there was no issue with it. We got on with the program. It was fine. But when Russia was saying, oh no, Ukraine doesn't want to be independent, and then boom, like that, and then I remember we were told that we could catch new TV channels using a copper wire.
Uh-huh.
So I was the one to do that as a 10-year-old. I put the copper wire into, thank goodness I didn't get electrocuted, but I put the copper wire into the TV, like tried to put it into this hole, no, this hole, okay, maybe, and then twist it, and I got another 50 channels instead of 3 that we had. Yeah, all for free, and like you had to twist it a little bit more. And yeah, it was just completely different. So that was the big revolution, sort of. And yeah, and then the music education in Ukraine was very thorough and comprehensive. They do not, they do not goof around. If you want to do undergrad in music, you need to do 7 years of music school.
Wow.
In piano and violin, or 5 years in all other instruments. No offense to other players. But you do music theory, solfege, music history, choir, secondary instrument, all of that is music school. And then for undergrad you cannot do composition. You can do anything else. And then you can do composition for your higher degree. So yeah, so I didn't want to be a composer at that time. I did my undergrad in classical and jazz piano.
Yeah.
And then I started as a jazz pianist when I was 4.5. And then we added classical training onto it when I was about 7.
So you really started as a jazz player.
Yeah,
Very nice. So,
I was jamming.
So were you listening a lot?
Oh, I was listening since before I was born. My dad was playing jazz music nonstop, and then when my parents separated, my mom kept playing the music that he was listening to.
Oh, nice.
As a nostalgia, so I listened to it quite a lot, yeah. I grew up listening to jazz music by black performers. So when people say, who is your biggest influence? Which composers? It's like, black singers. They were.
So like Ella Fitzgerald.
Little girl from Ukraine. No, more contemporary ones. Al Jarreau.
Oh, okay.
George Benson.
Very nice.
Incognito, acid jazz,
Nice.
And Earth, Wind and Fire.
Nice. So like Maurice White.
Yeah. So
Very
that
nice.
stuff, and I loved all of it. So I grew up listening, and it was not even allowed. It was prohibited in the Soviet Union.
Really? So you couldn't listen to any Western music at all?
No jazz, no rock, God forbid. Just listen. But anyway, but anyway, so that was my childhood, and then I started composing when I was about 13. My mom was teaching piano as a secondary instrument to kids, and she wanted some fun pieces to play with them, so she would ask me to make arrangements of jazz songs like Smoke Gets in Your Eyes and Embraceable You and stuff like that.
Nice.
The classics. And I would make those arrangements, and I hated doing it because I hated notating. But then it worked for me in the end, and I did a 5-year bachelor's in jazz and classical piano and started composing towards the end of it, and then decided to do composition for higher degree, which is also another 5 years in Ukraine. And after that, if you're not bored yet with music, you can do a PhD.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry to keep backtracking.
That's all right.
Do you come from a family that plays music? Because you said your mother. Okay.
Musicians on both sides of the family.
Very nice.
My mom and grandma were choral singers and conductors, and they played piano. My dad and his uncle were percussionists, and my other grandpa was a saxophone player, but he could play any wind instrument.
Oh wow!
He could play some instruments with his nose. That was terrible.
Like do a little nose
it's
flute.
Terrible. Yeah. And he was the conductor of Ukraine's #1 pops orchestra.
Oh,
so
cool.
they toured the entire Soviet Union for decades. And we don't have bands in Ukraine, but we have pops orchestras.
Yeah, that's another question I had was is there a big wind band tradition in Ukraine?
Zero, there's nothing. We have military bands and we have folk bands.
Okay.
But we don't have bands that play music, the repertoire that they play here.
Wow. So you wouldn't have had like a beginning band class maybe
Zero.
like you would have here.
No.
Wow.
No.
Why is that? Do you
I don't know. It's just this tradition never came to us, and also we don't have at schools. We don't have music programs at schools because we have a separate music school.
Okay.
So we have separate music schools, and those, some of them might have symphony orchestra, but usually not because the school load is much bigger than it is here usually. Like, I don't know American system. In Australia, school, you do school for 13 years. So I don't know, it's probably similar here,
Yes.
right? Yeah. So in Ukraine, I started my undergrad, I just turned 14 when I started my undergrad. So it's very different. School is much more condensed. There's the high school, you're done with high school in 10 years. And or you can graduate after 8 if you're doing undergrad in music, or there are some other courses. And then you do the first 2 years you do the heavy load in mathematics and history and everything else together with all your music courses.
So at Kyiv, at the Kyiv Lier School, you started that when you were 14, 15? Okay.
Yeah, I just turned 14 in May and I started in September.
Wow. Yeah, that is a lot. But I do know that in Europe and in the East too, that is typically how it works.
Yeah.
Like your undergraduate degree, you really don't finish it until you're 18, 19
Yeah.
years, and then you can decide to go on somewhere next.
Yeah.
Oh, all right.
Yeah.
So you got your post grad degree like around when you were like 18, 19. That's when you started.
I started when I was 19, yeah,
Wow.
and so I was done with it when I was 24, and that was 10 years of university studies already behind my belt.
Wow.
So, and all of that was free of charge.
Wow, that's
Yeah.
so. Was that through the state? Or-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Very
You
nice.
most I don't know, it may have changed since then,
Mhm.
but most kids in my day were doing it for free. And people who like didn't do as well in the exams, like basically didn't have enough talent, they could do it on they could pay
Mhm.
to study. They had a couple of spots for that.
Okay.
My grandma always made this she always made this comment. She was like, if I cannot do composing, like there's not enough money in the world, how can you pay and study it? You either have it or you don't.
Yeah.
And she was the only person in the family who was not a musician.
Uh-huh.
but I thought, yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
You know, it makes sense. 'Cause,
No, yeah. And sometimes those people who are not musicians have that really great perspective.
yeah, it's
Yeah.
interesting to see that.
But that's all really fascinating. Another big question I had was, so you didn't start your composition degree until later,
Yeah.
until after your undergrad. Were you composing during your undergraduate
Yeah.
degree? Because you said
Yeah.
you started composing around 13, 14.
Yeah, so I was writing a couple pieces for my mom's students just because I didn't want to make those arrangements. I thought writing your own would be easier, you know? And then, which in a way it is, but
Yes, it can be.
yeah. But then, as I was doing my undergrad, it's not an important detail, but I'll mention it anyway. So undergrad in Ukraine is actually 4 years,
Mhm.
but there was an option to extend it to a bachelor's, which is a bit different.
Mhm.
And it's like honors diploma, I
Oh.
guess, by 1 more year,
Mhm.
which is what I did because I didn't know. There was no jazz piano at the conservatory, which is the higher degree
Mhm.
place. There was no jazz piano, and I didn't want to do classical piano, restrict myself to just classical piano. It didn't feel creative enough to me for what I wanted to do. And so I stayed for 1 more year to just keep learning and to figure out what I wanted to do next. And then when I was entering the conservatory, you cannot enter on your bachelor's diploma because you would have to pay, because bachelor's is considered as a higher degree.
Uh-huh.
And you cannot get 2 higher degrees for free in Ukraine. You can get 1.
Okay.
And so I had to just hide my bachelor's diploma because it was separate. So I got a diploma, undergrad diploma after 4 years,
Mhm.
and then a separate bachelor's diploma after 5th year, and I had to put it away
Uh-huh.
and enter the conservatory with the diploma which was from 4 years, which was summa cum laude, so it worked really well. They took away 2 of the 5 exams that they have, entrance exams.
That's a good deal.
If you have summa cum laude, you don't have to take 5, you just have to take 3, so that worked well. But with composing, so when I was in my 4th year, I think, I had as part of the curriculum, we had the jazz ensemble, and it was my friends and me playing together.
So you're playing in a big band. Okay.
Oh, a chamber ensemble,
Okay.
a chamber jazz ensemble,
Okay.
like your, usual suspects, the piano, a written section.
Drums, yeah.
Yeah, and trumpet, saxophone, maybe trombone,
Okay.
and that sort of thing. And so I was basically playing with my friends, with my peers. And my job as a pianist was, the mama of the ensemble, was to listen to the famous performances of jazz standards
Nice.
and notate them.
Okay.
Notate, yeah, nice, let me finish. And
It's like, but was it
yeah,
nice?
yeah.
No? Yeah.
You need to notate improvisations
Yeah.
with rhythm and everything. And notate the famous improvisations so you could play those. I know that some people could just improvise, but
Yeah.
I couldn't improvise. Now I improvise every day for my composing, but back then, ironically, I couldn't improvise. I didn't know you needed to practice in order to improvise. I was like, God just didn't give me this talent, I guess. And then people would be like, practice. And I'm like, just never had the talent, you know.
I just, just wasn't one of those people.
Yeah. Not meant to be, yeah.
That's funny.
And like when people who are amazing improvisers, they tell me, well, you needed to play this in like all 24 different keys. And like, and my friend said, well, maybe you could write something yourself and we could play that. You could try. You said you were writing little pieces for your mom's students. And I was like, okay, I will try. So I wrote these two little things, Nostalgia and I don't remember what the other one was called, and Carnival. And I brought them into the class, and my friends loved those. They were all over those, and they were like, this is the best stuff ever. Spoiler, it was not, but to them it was. They were really into it. That's like, oh, this is something brand new we're playing by our friend. Yeah. And we didn't have composition department, so nobody was writing, and the students were not playing pieces written by other students. And so they were just so supportive and like, this is the best. And I remembered that feeling, and I was like, I want to feel this for the rest of my life. I want to be a composer. And then so that's how it all started for me. It sprouted from the from my experience as a pianist and the relationships with, as a performer, I should say, and from the relationships with my friends.
Yeah.
So music for me is always, I say music, I'm here to see Professor Burns, because I just wanted to hug her.
She's a great hang, too.
Yeah. So, it's like that for me. I just want to see people, I want to make friends, and music is a big part of it, because when they choose to play my music, I don't want to shove it down their throat, but when they choose to play my music, that to me means that they like it, and they like what I have to say, and they like me, and that connection forms, Yeah. And so it becomes it just becomes one whole.
Yeah, it's like a loop. It's like a full circle moment.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So, but it sprouts from that moment when I was 18 and I was writing that crap for my friends.
Yeah.
And then I remember now, I was really lucky because I was receiving a lot of support. So our teacher said, let's do a TV show where you guys will play this stuff. And they called it the Cathy Likhuta Ensemble. I never would have done that. Oh my God.
That's a cool name.
Yeah, I mean, if you are Cathy Likhuta. But it sounds too self-centered. Like I would never do it right now, Maybe the CL Ensemble, or some, at the very most, yeah. But they called it that at that point, and like everybody voted on it, and except for me, so that's fine. And we played these pieces at the national TV stations. And there was a show called 35 Minutes of Jazz, which was a weekly program, and they did a whole program about us, and we played 3 of my pieces, and the night in Tunisia. So those 4, and and I was just getting a lot of support, and then I moved to full-time composing from there.
And have you ever heard those recordings?
Yes.
Okay.
And
I'm sure they're more for posterity. I'm sure it's really
they're
great.
Not bad.
Yeah,
they're not bad. Like I don't want to share them now.
Yeah.
But they're very cute. Yeah. They're very cute, and they're a nice time capsule.
And that's the thing too, you get to look back at maybe a piece you wrote 10 years ago and say that's like a snapshot of me at that moment of where I was in my journey.
Exactly, yeah. So it's very cute, and I just remember the amount of passion I had for this whole thing at that point. It was like so excited I can't sleep. this
Yeah.
is how I'm the luckiest person to be doing what I'm doing, you know?
Yeah, and I agree with you too. I think it's all about the connections you make with people.
Yeah.
Because music doesn't happen without people.
Yeah,
You know?
and also it's not like, you know, it doesn't pay enough to do it just for the money.
Oh, absolutely.
So you have
there has to be emotional currency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You really have to. Yes, and that's what I tell people. Emotional currency. I love that saying.
Yeah.
I tell people to take the feeling I have when I'm sharing my music with people, when they're playing my music and I come out on stage, when I finish a piece, when a student from a place I haven't visited yet, I'm visiting next week,
Mm-hmm.
writes to me, finds me on Facebook and writes to me and tells me that this piece is healing them right now. You know, what is the price for all of that? What is the check? What should I write on that check? There is no amount. It's just so
there's nothing.
special.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you know.
You can't equate it in words or numbers or anything.
Yeah,
So,
exactly. So it's really important to. I was telling the composition students at UMKC that if you make it your life, you know, you can't really separate work from life when you're a composer if you want to do it right, you know.
Yeah.
It just, you make it your life. Your conductors, your performers, they become your best friends, and you're having fun on and off stage, inside and outside of rehearsal room, and it all becomes this one big conglomerate.
Yeah.
And then that's when you're doing it right, and it becomes your life,
Yeah.
whole life. There's no work or life.
Yeah.
There's work and family.
Yeah.
But there is no separation from anything else.
Yeah, the lines get blurred, and that's
Yeah.
okay. You know, some people like to have their lines very defined.
Yeah.
But, you know, for people like us that you know, we have to spend so much time outside of just making it happen.
Yeah. Yeah. It
The-
also becomes depressing if you try to look at the statistics. If you want to have that time out of work.
Yeah.
It's like, well, it's not gonna happen, so like
Yeah.
good luck. You know?
Exactly.
But if you're happy with that, it's like, yeah, I'm hanging out with my peeps all the time.
Yeah, and if you
So,
love
yeah.
doing it, then it doesn't feel like work.
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
It's just something cool you get to do every day.
Exactly.
Moving on to more of your composition. So I really love Home Away from Home because it really does. It's almost like episodic.
Yeah, yeah.
Because at least as I understand it, each one of the movements is kind of your take on the different places where you've lived. Correct.
Yeah, or the experience.
The experience.
It's more the experience.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not even. Actually, it's not. Sorry, I'm sorry that I will disappoint you. It's a bit different. It's not
That's
about me. It's actually about the students for whom it was written.
Okay.
So the opening is I usually try to tailor my music to, or create my music for people who commission it.
Mm-hmm.
Or who are going to be premiering it or
Mhm.
whatever. And this one, Jason Noble commissioned it for Columbia College Wind Ensemble, Columbia University Wind Ensemble for premiere in Carnegie Hall.
Mm-hmm.
And which obviously, as a little girl from Ukraine, I was very excited about.
Yeah.
But also, I asked him whom I was writing for, and he said that this band, almost all the students were freshmen.
Mm-hmm.
And before that, my easiest piece was grade 5.5.
Mm-hmm.
And so
It's hard to write easy music.
yeah, so we agreed on 4.5, and then I remember thinking, okay, how can I make it special for these particular kids? And about bless you.
Thank you so much.
And I remember thinking, okay, well, they're freshmen, so in America, that usually means leaving their parents' house and coming to. Cause I lived with my mom the entire time when I studied, because
Mhm.
it's all in the same city, you know. But here it means leaving their parents' nest and coming on college and making new community for yourself and new friends and new life, and it's all completely different, and it's exciting, but it's also, it makes you nervous and anxious, etc., you know, and everybody has different experiences. So that opening is like when you sit in an airplane and you fasten the seatbelt and they close the doors and the engine turns on,
Yes.
and you're like, okay, well, if I wanted to get out now, I can't.
Mm-hmm.
So this is the point of no return. Let's just go.
Exactly.
So that engine turning on, and it's like when you moved to the college and things start, things take off. And then the lyrical section was inspired by my own experience. So it's when I visited my grandma's apartment first time after she passed. She was the first person who died in my family when I was already alive, and I was maybe 26 or so, and I was coming from the U.S., and so I came after she died, and I was a mess. And then, next time when it happened to me was a different family member who was just as close. It's a different experience already. You already know, sort of, your body knows how to deal with it. But that first one was just so much sadness and so sentimental. And so the piano solo section and then the chorale sort of that comes out of that is inspired by that. And then, but I think everyone can relate to it. Everyone who lost a loved one and who went through this experience of visiting that home can relate to that. And then after that, it's just musical, whatever it is, slightly dramatic and slightly nostalgic, sentimental section. And then the Ukrainian section is because John Lynch, who is a dear friend and who was waiting for this piece to do chunks of it at the Midwest Clinic at a Composers for Diversity, the Directors for Diversity presentation. He wanted me to include some Ukrainian elements, and I'm so grateful to him for that, because I wrote this Ukrainian, like almost a Ukrainian folk dance sounding thing, and I love it. And then he played that one at the Midwest Clinic, and there was about 1,000 band directors in the room, and they didn't know that it was my piece. The piece was not finished yet. I wrote 3 chunks for John to play, and then I was finishing the piece, connecting them.
Transitioning.
Because there was not enough time. And when the Ukrainian section came on, and they played really, really well, it was Mary Schneider's band from Eastern Michigan. And when they played it, the band directors around me started like, what is it? I could see in their faces that it was something different for them, and they were almost dancing on their seats, and they thought it was cool music, they seemed to really enjoy it. And I just thought, why have I not done it before? Letting out my Ukrainian roots through band music. Because it's nobody's doing that, and it's so fun. And so that was the section. And then just the ending, just for just your regular structure. So I don't remember what thoughts went into that. I remember that I wanted that little waltz as a little sort of candy before the end. But those were the inspirations. So and I think that it's the emotional, the feelings that I have associated with 3 different homes, and the nostalgia and the excitement when you go to visit each of these. That's what made the emotional language of the piece.
Well, I really like that too, especially, and I thank you for clarifying that for me.
Yeah,
too.
Of course.
That'll extremely hit home with these kids in the symphonic band, because a lot of them are freshmen.
I think it will.
Younger.
Yeah. I was just talking about the piece at Mizzou last week, because they're also doing it, and UMKC did it as well on Sunday. Mizzou were on the consortium, and I rehearsed it with them in February 2020. And then the pandemic happened, and they didn't get to perform it. So they picked it up again, and I rehearsed it with them again this time, and they're performing it on the 15th. I think it might be the same day as the guys are performing it here. But one of the flute players came to me after the rehearsal, and she said, I am from New Hampshire, and then I lived in California, and now I'm here, and it just all feels, even though the distances are smaller than Ukraine, Australia, and the US, it just feels, I can feel it, what you were saying about the piece and the music. It's like, I feel like it's my own, and it meant so much. I felt really,
you're distilling that feeling. And it's a feeling that it's a feeling that you're trying to share with all the students, which is great.
And I also want that, I want my music to I want performers to be able to speak their own feelings through my music.
Yeah.
I feel like it's a privilege.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
so it's very really special when that happens.
Oh, absolutely, yeah. And this is the first time you've utilized like Ukrainian folk inspired melodies.
In band, yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Awesome.
But since then, I've been very happy to do that.
Was it like a melody you found in a book, or was
No.
it like an original? It's
No.
inspired by that.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dallas Wins did performance of this piece in May last year, and May 22. Yeah, and Jerry Jenkins said, so Catherine used a folk tune here, and I was watching the live stream. I was like, no, I did not. I am the folk. The tune is mine.
Yeah.
You know,
It's folk inspired.
Yeah, well,
Yes.
it is written by a Ukrainian folk person. Me.
Yeah.
I'm at least 6th generation Ukrainian on both sides of my family, and then I don't know what happens after that because it was a long time ago.
Mm-hmm.
But 6 generations guaranteed are all Ukrainians.
Yeah.
So yeah, this music runs through my veins.
Yeah.
When people were asking me to describe what makes music Ukrainian folk music, I was really struggling because I don't think about it. It's just like it comes from my heart.
Yeah.
So I had to start analyzing it, and I was like, oh, boring. But yeah.
Maybe that's what makes it so special. Is because it's so
Yeah.
visceral. It's from
Yeah.
these places, and that's something I think is prevalent throughout the Ukrainian people. Is just this resolve.
Yes.
This strength. to
Yes.
it. I'm definitely trying to explore that more in my own research as well.
Yeah.
But that's
Thank you for doing that. That's
Oh
great.
yeah. I mean, I just to give you some of my own background, my great grandfather, he was born in Scranton, Pennsylvania, but both of his parents and my great grandparents were born in I almost said Krakow. That's in Poland. Born in the Ukraine.
Okay.
So I need to get an exact city date. So I definitely got some lineage way up the line.
Yeah, that's
Um,
really cool.
My grandma always used to say like we were mutts, like just like all these different
Yeah.
all these different lineages from around. But anyways,
Yeah.
another question I had is when did you come to the U.S.?
Yeah. When I finished my studies,
Mm-hmm.
my husband. I came because of my husband. He
Okay.
was also from Kiev,
Okay.
and he's a mathematician. And he went to the U.S. for 6 months on an exchange program to live in a family here and go to school when he was 10 years old.
Mm-hmm.
He lived in Vestal, New York, and
Okay.
we still keep in touch with his parents from that family at that time.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, but he applied for grad schools in the U.S. because he liked it there when he was 10, and he
Mhm.
picked up English there.
Mhm.
Couldn't say anything when he came, but he learned English.
Okay.
And so he was a very bright kid in Ukraine. He was winning different things and whatnot. And then he applied to the U.S. without much hope because we all thought that U.S.'s education was way superior to Ukraine. It was not.
Yeah,
It was
I
not.
was gonna
And
say.
ours was free.
Uh-huh.
His education was also free. We were also paid a stipend.
Oh, nice.
West Side. Yeah. It was pennies, but it gave us money for
Yeah.
coffee and Pepsi.
Exactly.
But he got into a bunch of grad schools. And he accepted an offer from Cornell, and so he went to do his grad school at Cornell.
Fantastic.
And I joined him a year later when I finished my studies, and so I moved to the U.S. with him. We lived in Ithaca for 5 years.
Great town. I'm from Syracuse, New York.
Oh,
so-
awesome! Yeah,
so
yeah,
I know Ithaca well. My dad went to
Yeah.
Ithaca College. I was going to ask you, did you like growing up? I mean, not growing up. Did you like
Yeah.
spending time in
Oh,
that city?
it's I would come back and I would live there any day of the week.
It's very pretty.
It's gorgeous.
As long as you like,
Ithaca is
Very
gorgeous,
nice.
and it is, yeah.
as long as you like walking uphill. you
Yeah,
know,
yeah,
it's a
I
great
do,
town.
I do. So
Yeah.
it's maybe not in the winter, but maybe I would go to Australia in the winter. I don't know.
Yeah,
but,
yeah.
But it's really nice, yeah. And so we lived there for 5 years. Well, my husband for 5, and I did for 4 years. And I couldn't speak any English at that time. And we met with Dana Wilson.
Oh, nice.
And yes, and I didn't learn anything about my band writing from him because I hadn't started writing for band yet at that time. But he wanted to help out, and he liked my music, and we had the same common. We had a lot in common in our compositional languages
Yes.
because of the background in jazz piano.
Yes.
And so he said, you know, if you don't come very often, maybe every couple of weeks or so, I can coach you free of charge. And so he did that for 3.5 years.
Wow.
We became dear friends, and I just love him to absolute bits. And he was a fantastic coach on chamber music.
Wow.
We had so much fun. It was the best. And then half a year later, Steve Stuckey offered to do the same for me.
Cool.
And so he coached me free of charge for 3 years as well. And so I really lucked out. I sucked all the luck out of Ithaca that Ithaca ever had, because that was just, can you imagine? And Stuckey just had won Pulitzer Prize at that time.
Yeah.
And he was in his like 17th year of composer in residence with LA Phil. And he offered to teach this girl from Ukraine for free.
And he was living in Ithaca at that time?
Yeah,
Okay.
well, you know, half of the time, because
Okay.
half of the time he was in LA.
Yeah.
And he was really a huge shot. I think it really helped that I couldn't understand it at that time, because I would have been too intimidated.
Yeah.
I would have just been like, oh my God. But here I was like, great guys, I'll see you in 2 weeks. You know, like, thank you.
Were you flying to
Yeah.
LA?
Yeah. So as Australians say, Los Angeles. So yeah, that was my time in Ithaca, and then we moved to Chicago because my husband got a postdoc at the University of Chicago, and nobody cared about my music there. Nobody would respond to my emails. And then we moved to the U.S. because he got a job from University of Queensland, and that's been 11 years, and that's our home now.
Awesome.
And I, you know, sometimes I say, and we never look back, but people are like, well, you are here now, though. I'm like, yeah, I know, twice a year.
Yeah.
You know, I love coming back, and most of my work is here, actually.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And what were like some of the biggest differences between obviously growing up in Ukraine and then coming here to the U.S.? Like cultural and musical differences?
Oh yeah, everything. I remember. Well, it was tricky. So obviously I didn't have much money growing up. My dad was very wealthy, but that wealth did not trickle down too much to me. And I didn't have a computer. I didn't have internet access, that sort of thing. That was rare at that time. Still. The olden days and the turn of the century, and I couldn't go because my mom was sick. I had to take care of her in the evenings to replace the nurses that we could afford. We could only afford the daytime nurses, and I couldn't go to any concerts because all the concerts were happening in the evening. So I didn't have any exposure like after my undergrad, where I listened to a lot of live jazz. I didn't have any exposure to classical music, to the sounds of violin, flute, any of those instruments, because I just couldn't. I had to be at home, and at home I could not listen to anything either, you know. And when I came to Ithaca, between Ithaca College and Cornell, there were a good 7 to 10 concerts per week. And the library where you could listen to new music or any music, you know, and listen to instruments. So that was a massive difference, and I just started listening to everything that I could, and I had headache from all the new music that I heard, and I was like, I don't understand any of it. And then in terms of life and how the society works, it was all different. Ukrainians are much more restrained, and they're much more like they can be much more ashamed of things. And like you know, you come to the restaurant and sometimes you would see an American, like I see somebody's having this cool looking fish, and I'm not gonna stare. I'm just like with my peripheral vision trying to see what it is. When a New Yorker would come and would be like, oh wow, what is that? What did you order? That looks amazing, you know? So
really in your face.
Ukrainians would be like, oh my God. But I like the American way more. But it was a big adjustment, you know? And also I remember seeing kids and how kids were like, kids would be they would come and maybe sometimes like their hair would be messy or something. They would come to a dinner gathering with their parents, and their hair would be messy, and like it was a no in Ukraine. You had to look really nice and shiny, but they would be happy and they would feel like there was this sense of freedom coming from it, and it felt more like this is how it should be.
Yeah.
I remember that I really liked that, and I thought I will be like that with my kid.
Yeah.
I'll be a bit more loose in
Yeah.
terms of, it's not really that important that your tights are properly put on as long as you are having a lot of fun. So
Yeah, exactly.
So I had that. I remember that was a big sort of revelation for me. I thought that American kids were happier because of that.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I think especially whether you're a child or a parent, you have to kind of walk that line between having fun and knowing when to get stuff done.
Yeah. So and another thing that was very different is Ukrainians never say they're proud of themselves or of their work. It's a big no-no.
Like they don't self-promote or anything, or
they can self-promote, but
Okay.
they're never gonna say, like, I just got this award from my university, alumni award, and I can say that I'm proud of myself. I wrote 2 concerti this year and a Dallas Wins 13-minute piece.
Mhm.
I am damn proud of my work.
Mhm.
But Ukrainians would never say that, Ukrainians who live in Ukraine would never say that they're proud of their achievements. You just don't say it.
Well, that's awesome. You're breaking the thread a little bit.
Yeah, because they are, well, you have to be proud. Otherwise, why are you doing that?
What's the point?
Whom are you trying to make proud if not yourself?
Yeah.
You know?
And there also goes in the fact it's like a lot of, no matter what, I think at the end of the day, we don't put anything out musically, compositionally that we don't believe in, or
Yeah.
something that we're not happy with.
Yeah.
I know sometimes you got to meet the deadlines.
Yeah.
but
But I can't. I do not. My brain does not differentiate between the two. My brain does not know how to cut corners. Like,
Mhm.
okay, we really need to move on right now because the dead. No, this is not. This measure needs to be perfect, okay? And then we move on. But the deadline, shh. Yeah. It's so frustrating.
Yeah.
But it's been working so far. So
Yeah.
Ukrainians are superstitious, as you can see. I'm knocking on wood several times already.
Well, I'm Ukrainian too. So.
Yeah. But people who don't like their own music really annoy me because it's
Or put it down.
like I am the biggest fan of my own music, and I don't talk about it usually, but I think this is how it should be, because sending the music out into the world and sending the music to the performers that you don't like yourself is like having somebody come over for dinner and telling them, well, I don't really like this food, so I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like,
No, absolutely.
no, this is the most delicious freaking dish ever, in my opinion. In my opinion is a very important part.
Yeah.
So, like, in my opinion, this is, but also, like, objectively, because I studied a lot. So, this is, the form works well, etc., and it's idiomatic,
Yeah.
So, for me, that's really important. Like, when people say, oh, you like your own music? I'm like, yeah. I don't start a conversation with that, but yeah, I do like my own music, and you should too, or if you don't, maybe change something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I completely agree. And I'm glad you mentioned the Berry and Rise piece. Can you give us a little information about that? Has it been premiered yet? I know they did
It
Texas
premieres
Tech.
next Tuesday.
Okay.
So Texas Tech is doing the consortium premiere, and that will be the first consortium premiere, because I haven't sent it to anyone yet. Sarah McCoy told me that she wants to rehearse it while I'm there.
She's awesome.
Yeah, I know. I can't wait to hang out with her.
Yeah.
She's really funny. She
is really funny.
She messaged me and she said, before the Midwest Clinic, and she said, so I know there's this consortium for your piece, and Eric Allen, who works there as well, he brought my music to Texas Tech.
He's also great.
Yeah. So I think he did Planet B, and then Sarah got familiar with my music, I think, through him. And then she said, okay, so I heard there's a consortium for your piece, and I can't join any consortiums right now, but I'm going to join it anyway. But I want you to tell me about it in case, but yeah, I'll join anyway. But anyway, we should meet. I was like, I love you already. Let's.
Yeah, that's pretty great.
Yeah, and so I'm going there, and they're doing the consortium premiere on this 17th, I think, of November, or 19th. And Jerry Junkin and Dallas Wins are doing it next Tuesday. That's going to be the world premiere, and Myerson, Santa, and
That's awesome.
Yeah, there's been a build up to that event. It's
Yeah.
really exciting. It's sharing the program with Viet Quong's Vital Signs, So it's gonna be a fun concert.
His music is also very
Yeah,
good.
yeah.
Is the piece kind of about what's going on currently?
Yeah,
Okay.
so it's a 13-minute through composed piece. It's almost like a little symphony or rhapsody or a big fourth movement of a symphony. So it's very emotional, very dramatic, and it's when Dallas Winds commissioned me. So they played Home Away from Home last May, and then May 2022, and then they contacted me and they said, we want to commission you to write a new piece for us, and we want to make this clear. We want a piece from you. It doesn't have to be a piece about Ukraine, but if you want to, you can make it about Ukraine and about the stoic spirit of your people. And I said, A, thank you for clarifying it. B, hell yeah. So, so I was like, yeah, I'm gonna write about my people. That's awesome. And Kim Campbell, the artistic director of Dallas Winds, he said something like celebrating the stoic spirit of people of Ukraine. And I thought, that's perfect. This is what I want the piece to be about. And then I was thinking about the title for a while, because I usually come up with the title first, and then I write the music. The title gives me the ideas for everything else.
Yes.
And I was thinking something with roots, and my husband was like, no. I would give him an option, and he would be like, no, there's a song by Sepultura with this title. I would give him another option with roots, and he would give me another rock song, and I'm like, you are listening to too much rock music. but anyway, I decided, okay, no roots, because he said it's a bit superficial for what you want to write.
Yeah.
And I was just thinking for weeks, and then and he said, just refresh and do something else, and I started thinking about this poem by Taras Shevchenko, our most famous Ukrainian poet from the 19th century. And his most famous poem, Zapovit, Testament, is like every kid in Ukraine knows it. And I started going through it and thinking, and there is a moment where the translation is bury and rise. So bury me when I die, and then rise up to protect the land against the enemies. And I thought, this is literally what Ukrainians are doing. Yes. They're burying the loved ones who were killed by Russia, and then they're rising up and protecting the land. Yeah. And I was like, bury and rise, this is what this piece is going to be. Yeah. And I ran it by Dallas Winds, and they were like, that's perfect. They gave me full artistic freedom, but I like all the ducks to be in a row before I start composing, because I really don't like changing a thing. Once it's perfect for me, take it or leave it. It has to be my way, I really
I'm the same
don't.
way. It's like once it's done, it's done.
Yeah, exactly.
Unless there's something like glaring that needs to get fixed.
Or like orchestration edits, those I'm happy to do all the time. But in terms of musical material, no, this is now my my turn to dictate. Yeah. So we did that, and then I wrote the piece. It was a very emotional process, and it's they gathered the consortium for it, but I'm being paid by them, and they also gave me a very generous travel honorarium, so I would come over. So I'm in the country thanks to them.
Awesome.
Yeah, and I'm gonna be spending 6 days with them, working on the piece, and wow. I was promised some barbecue as well.
Oh, don't get better than Austin.
Yeah.
Or Dallas.
Kansas City was pretty good as well. But yeah, that's gonna be awesome, and just such a privilege to be able to work with Jerry and with all these musicians. And I've been getting friend requests on Facebook from people from Dallas area, which is really nice. I think as they're learning the piece, they're getting in touch, and it feels very special. And Sarah McCoy's band started working on the piece as well, and one of the students messaged me yesterday. I've never met her before. I've never been to Lubbock, and she messaged me and she said that she is Jewish, and that this piece just has speaks to her so much, So I wrote it about Ukraine, but the conflict in Israel for her, it's hurting a lot,
Yeah.
and this piece is helping her reconcile with her emotions as well, which was really special to me when I saw that message.
Yeah, that's fantastic.
Yeah, she said maybe we could chat when you were here, and I said, girl, any amount of time that you need, absolutely.
That's awesome.
Let's chat. So yeah.
Well, you're very gracious with your time, and
Oh,
people
well.
like me and people like her really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I'm already here. It's
Yeah.
not like I don't need to move my flight by one day or something.
Yeah.
And I also appreciate you guys. I appreciate you being interested in my music. Like when I was at UMKC, one of the younger band directors there, who is a recent graduate, he came to me and he said, the last piece they were doing on the program was my hardest piece, Me Disagrees. And he came to me and he said, it was so great to hear Me Disagrees live, finally, after all these years of listening to it online. I was like, dude, why were you listening to it online? It's like, because I listened to your music, like, I like your music. I didn't know him, and you know, that's very special to me. I don't take it for granted.
Yeah.
Because without the performers and without the listeners, what are we?
Yeah. What's all this for?
Yeah, I usually say that without my performers, I'm a crazy lady with a bunch of scores.
Yeah.
That's it. You know, so yeah, so I always take, and with my teaching and with the rehearsal process and with all that, even though I was not in a band, but I was a kid, and I always put myself in the kid's shoes. When I'm teaching, I don't teach from the perspective of Cathy, who just wrote for Dallas Winds. I'm teaching from a perspective of a Cathy who's 19 and writing her first piece and got stuck for the first time.
Yeah.
And I'm trying to help from that point of view, and it works really well with the students.
Yeah.
So you know, it's just be a nice person. That really helps.
It does, and it makes the whole connection process that much more enjoyable.
And the thing I hate the most is, and I'm not gonna mention any names, but there are quite a few, but they're way more good people. But the thing I hate the most is when people are selectively nice.
I agree. Or only nice to people that can get them into a better place.
Yeah, exactly. So that's what I meant, basically. Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
so
yeah.
when you are just nice to Jerry Junkin, that sucks.
Yeah.
I just hate that, you know. 6 students yesterday ran to me and gave me a hug from last year, who knew me from last visit. That was very special to me. You know, it was. I wrote to my husband about that. I said that made my day.
Nice.
Because they're undergrads. They're just starting out, but it's the human connection.
Yeah.
You know, it means that I did something right, and something in what I do or who I am spoke to them, and that's special.
Yeah. And your music's special, and obviously it's special to have you here.
Thank
right
you.
Now. Yeah. I think with that, any other final thoughts to add?
No.
Need
you
more
tell
coffee?
Me. Oh yeah. Yeah, I was gonna get a 12-ouncer, but then I said I don't know. I've never met Shawn. I told Russ, never met Shawn. I don't know. Maybe he's bored, so I'll get a 16. But my coffee, there is still some coffee in here, so you're not boring, Shawn. Yeah.
I want to keep it, light and fresh, but
it is.
I think with that we can